Hello and welcome, star people. This is the Outlaw Astrology Podcast, and I'm your host, APM, your intrepid star guide. And brief check-in. We have a newsletter called the Daily Stargazer, free and paid versions. You can find that in the show notes. And we are also on Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest. And those links are also in the show notes. Also, reviews are greatly appreciated as they help other people find us. So give us 5 stars. Thank you very much in advance. And with that said and done, let's move on. Today we are going to I'm going to guide you deeper into our archetypal journey. We are on the hero's journey through the archetypal lens of astrology. And so we're exploring zodiacal archetypes via that hero's journey lens. And so as we descend into the mysterious realm of Scorpio, the transformer, or also the alchemist. And having learned the art of balance in relationship with Libra, we now face the ultimate test of intimacy, the willingness to be completely transformed through encounters with the other. That means other people. And so we're going to prepare to explore the underworld of shared resources, power, and psychological depths that most people prefer to avoid. And this is what we call intimacy. And now, with that said, onward. Okay, so we're going to be stepping into the descent of the sacred darkness. Scorpio stands as the gatekeeper to life's most profound mysteries: sexuality, death, shared resources, and psychological shadow work. Now, this fixed water sign is traditionally ruled by Mars, and in modern astrology by Pluto. And this represents the hero's necessary descent into the underworld, the confrontation with what has been hidden, denied, or repressed. So, unlike Libra's diplomatic negotiation of difference, Scorpio demands complete vulnerability and radical honesty. And it's the phase in the hero's journey where superficial connections just no longer satisfy. So that's the small talk. People with a lot of Scorpio energy in their charts are not known to be tolerant of small talk. They don't like the superficial. And in a society that loves politeness and the performance of that politeness, this can be very uncomfortable and challenging energy. Complete vulnerability, I'm not certain that can happen, but complete vulnerability means being fully vulnerable, sharing who you really are, what you really feel. So when I say vulnerability, we're talking about that which is not easily seen, which are emotions, feelings, our deepest secrets, which I believe we're allowed to have secrets. I'm not one of those people who's going to tell you need to blab every secret you got to the entire world so that you can feel heal and whole. In Scorpio's realm, being whole and healed looks entirely different than it looking beautiful. That would be the shadow of Libra, making everything look pretty. Whereas Scorpio, you got the sharp edges, you got the mossy undersides of rocks, you've got the slimy, the creepy, the gross, the gruesome, the macabre, the weird, in that way, hiding underneath all of those rocks. So vulnerability, you don't know what you're going to get. You could be stepping in a minefield, someone else's psychic minefield, psychological minefield, emotional and mental minefield with Scorpio energy. And so it's, where the small talk is no longer going to work. How's the weather? Do you like that tea? That's not going to be the way Scorpio energy prefers to work. We must risk everything. And let's not risk everything. Let's say we must take the risk to discover what lies beneath the surface. And what lies beneath the surface is usually secret, repressed, hidden. So it's unconscious energy, but not necessarily unconscious in the way that, say, the 12th house energy would be. This energy it was put there by us, or we were conditioned to put these types of experiences in our shadow in order to survive, in order to perform as a certain type of personality in this world that loves performance. And so we're looking to discover what lies beneath the surface. And so Scorpio teaches that true intimacy requires psychological vulnerability and or nakedness. So the courage to reveal parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden. And so we're looking at the goddess Persephone. And it depends on different lineages tell the story differently. In some tellings of the story, she went willingly. That's if, the empowering sort of feminist type of message. And then there's the one where she was taken there against her will. Either way, she ends up there and emerges as its queen, eventually. Now, in certain lineages also, Persephone's myth predates the myth of Hades, or Pluto. Pluto is the Roman name for Hades. They are the same god of death and the underworld. And he's he whose name you should not speak. So he who must not be named, the first time that was used was to refer to the god Hades or Pluto during the Greek and Roman periods of European civilization and culture. Okay? And so, like I said, parts you want to keep hidden. That's also the 8th house. That's the veil. That's what's behind there, secrets, shadows. It's also our shadow. So Persephone takes a loss of control and turns that into sovereignty. I consider Scorpio to be the sign of agency and sovereignty. I don't mean like queen-like energy, that's Leo. I mean owning yourself, reclaiming yourself from the red penning of others. Red penning is people walking around with their little figurative and symbolic red pen saying, no, I don't like this about you. You need to get rid of that, because we live in a culture that believes that you can just correct yourself to perfection, which is just not true. I am an advocate of this is how it is. This is how my nervous system operates. This is how I tend to think and emote. This is how I choose to express myself. And I need to learn to work with that rather than against it. And with Libra energy, we're learning to integrate all of those opposites within ourselves first. And then we take it to other relationships. That's my preferred mode of operating. But other people may choose to do it externally, meaning they choose to build bridges between opposites externally and then internalize that energy later once they've lived it out in the physical material world. And so Persephone has an annual cycle. As the story goes, she was kidnapped, taken to the underworld, and is lost like most people are until her mother mounts a rescue. But the Hades is not the sort of god that likes to be caught out or likes to lose, and so he either offers or tricks or deceives Persephone into eating 3 or 4, depending on who tells the story, pomegranate seeds, which is a symbol of food for the underworld, and which point she has to return to him during the cooling fall into winter months and return every spring, because she's also the goddess of spring. And so it's the scorpionic process of psychological transformation through darkness. That means our dark nights of the soul can be very potent and powerful events or times when we can transform. Now, am I suggesting that every dark night of the soul is going to lead to transformative gold and alchemy? No, I am not. I'm saying that the potential exists. And it is up to us to choose. And I'm not saying that it's always the right choice. I'm saying that sometimes it is a good choice. And it's up to us to discern for ourselves when, where, and how, and why that's going to happen. Okay, so if we're dealing with scorpionic energy, we're also dealing with the illusion of control. Now, I, much like all of us, would like to have more control than I actually have in my life. I would love superpowers. I mean, I I want to be the Sorcerer Supreme. I mean, really, superpowers like that? But it's a lot of responsibility anyway. And so there is an illusion of control. And so the Scorpio shadow emerges. And here is how it emerges. When we attempt to master what cannot be controlled. In fact, when we're talking about death, desire, and the depths of the psyche, those things are not easy to master, and they are not meant to be controlled. Our culture has an obsession with youth, with productivity, with forward progress and process, and positive thinking. And so this tends to reflect a collective denial of scorpionic energy and the scorpionic realm, that the inevitable cycles of decay and renewal govern all life. So, if there's going to be a spring and things being born, there's also going to be a time of decay and death, which would be, fall moving into winter. And if we are creators, there are going to be periods of birth, gestation, sustaining, and then there's going to be periods of death and decay. That is just part of creation. It's also part of nature and all of those natural creative cycles. And so when we're talking about this type of energy, in its unintegrated form, Scorpio's power can become manipulation, it can become jealousy, it can become obsession. Now, here's a note about all of these three things and other emotions and experiences. I am not an advocate of trying not to do these things. This is just not likely. It is human to manipulate. It's human to be jealous. It's human to experience envy. It's human to be obsessed. As a matter of fact, if there were no obsession, no one would be focused enough or committed enough to see through anything we do in this world. So you want to build a career as a creative artist? That requires an obsession with art to a certain degree. A passion, which is Mars, scorpionic Mars energy. And the desire to alchemize our feelings into art, that's Pluto's energy. And that's all scorpionic. So manipulation and jealousy have their places. There are positive sides to all of these things. Even the so-called negative emotions and negative experiences have a positive aspect to it. Jealousy tells you that that's something someone has is something you also want. It's trying to signal a need or a desire, and paying attention to these energies is wise. Why? Because we'll get our needs met. We'll get what we want if we're clear and open, at least to ourselves, about it. Now, Scorpio energy also teaches discernment in a different way. Virgo is a very discerning sign. It is trying to filter out the unnecessary for the beneficial. Scorpio energy likes to do the same. Scorpio energy teaches us that it's not necessary to let it all hang out unless that's what we want to do, unless that feels right for us. That it's okay to not share every emotion with everyone, because not everyone can hold our emotions in a way that's supportive, caring, patient, kind, nurturing. Some people don't have that easily. And some people have it, but they have to be well rested, well fed, well nurtured and supported themselves before they can offer that. Their cup must be filled before they can pour out anything. And there are some people who do this all the time because it's natural for them. Wherever you fall on that spectrum, Scorpio energy is teaching you how to be discerning about your internal depths. Your inner world is not a playground. Your inner world is not a carnival or a funhouse, or it is, if that's what you prefer. But my point is, it is not Disneyland. It is not a Six Flags. It is not any of these groovy little places we can go and play and have fun and everyone's allowed in. Scorpio energy is, this is secret and hidden for a reason. And the reason sometimes is known to us and sometimes unknown to us, and our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to be open so that we can use our scorpionic energy, meaning that we can integrate its insights that we get from observing other people and discerning which of those people we want to be more intimate with. That is the whole point of Scorpio energy. However, it also, as I said, there's the illusion of control and also the illusion of power, because control and power are illusions, star people. They're actually not real. I have to pretend that someone has power in order for them to have it. I also have to pretend that they can in any way meddle or disrupt or in any way my agency to do as I please in this world. Now, am I suggesting that we should just run amok? No, obviously not. I'm just simply saying that scorpionic energy makes us more aware that power and control are actually illusions, if not outright myths. And so in its unintegrated form, as I said, we've got manipulation, we've got jealousy, we've got obsession, which in and of themselves can be teachers. If we choose if we choose that as a spiritual, as an esoteric lesson, we can learn and integrate, is what I'm trying to say. And so desperate attempts to control what is uncontrollable. Emotions can be influenced. They are not meant to be controlled. Okay, and that's what Scorpio energy learns. And the paradox here at Scorpio's heart reveals that true power emerges not from domination, but from sometimes taking your hands off the wheel. And I'm suggesting this in a very symbolic way. So I don't like the word surrender as a rule, because I don't actually understand what people mean when they say that. So letting go, I understand that. So sometimes you gotta just take your hands off. You gotta let go. You've done all you can. You've been as discerning as you can. You've been as intimate as you can. You've been as clear as you can. And now the best you can do now is take your hands off, release, and let go. Life can be transformative, and so can its processes. But the hero who cannot release their grip has a harder time being reborn. And so when I'm thinking of that energy, I'm thinking of the Hindu goddess Kali, who is the goddess of time and change, and whose fierce appearance symbolizes that necessary destruction that precedes birth. And so her dancing, which is cosmic, demonstrates how to release, how to let go and lean into life cycles, so that greater power, we can get that greater creative power, rather than trying to control things. Because trying to control things is exhausting. But another thing that Scorpio energy can give us is also the alchemical rebirth. And also, birth, but alchemical rebirth. So we want to evolve beyond that Scorpio shadow that believes that you can have power and you can control things, to evolve beyond that, because Pluto, the modern ruling planet of Scorpio, is also the planet of evolution. So even Scorpio energy wants to evolve. And so we have to understand that transformation isn't something we achieve, but something we allow. And that makes me think of Osiris from the ancient Egyptian pantheon, Kamut, who was dismembered and reconstituted. And dismembered by the god Set, a sibling. This seems to happen a lot in ancient myth. And then reconstituted through the healing and magic of his spouse, the goddess Isis. And sometimes what we learn from this myth is that sometimes we get damaged in life's slings and arrows, sometimes even broken down before a new, more integrated self can emerge. So sometimes this is having a hard time in life. For example, my adolescent years were filled with very scorpionic strife and difficulty before I could finally, emerge, butterfly. Think butterfly here, coming out of a chrysalis. In my own personal experience, when I experienced that stuff, I left a school with all of the people that I'd grown up with, and I went to a totally different school where I didn't know anybody. And for years, I always thought, wow, that was less than ideal. I made a mistake. Here is where it gets interesting. Not so much a mistake as it allowed me to pierce that scorpionic illusion that I had. The idea that I could, one, be in control in the first place. I thought I could control, how I could be perceived, and I thought I could control emotions at that point. And I also thought I can, that how my life turned out was also something I can control rather than something I can influence. And so that alchemical rebirth is suddenly realizing one day, after those experiences, I had enough distance between me and those experiences to realize that was an opportunity to reinvent myself. That previous to that point, I'd had a very, I knew people, yes. I had friends, yes. But I was also seen as a very specific person. That was not a clean slate. Secondary school and going to a new school with new people allowed me to step into a new persona, a new aspect of myself, and learning to integrate that part of me into my scorpionic depths is a work that is very much still in progress to this day, but started when I was a teenager. So when we're talking about learning to be vulnerable, that I would say, that taught me a lot about vulnerability and also about power and how people are very rarely as they appear. And so a mature transformer recognizes that power isn't about ever being complete, never being vulnerable. So it is about having the courage to be changed by experience, but it's also the risk of vulnerability for the reward of greater intimacy and connection. And hopefully a chance at integration and being transformed by experience to evolve to a more expanded view of ourselves and the world. So in relationships, this can mean developing the capacity to merge without losing ourselves. That's one of the challenges of Scorpio energy is the integration. It is the push and the pull between us and others. It is being intimate with others, being part of something greater without losing who we are in the process. And that in and of itself is a very, it's difficult, it's challenging to pull off. So understanding that true intimacy can transform both people or all the people while preserving our essential nature, because in astrology, our essential nature is represented by the moon. At least that's how I see it. And so preserving that whilst also being receptive to sharing what is deepest within us and most important can be very transformative, very healing, and very integrative. So Scorpio at its highest expression teaches us that what we most fear often contains our greatest gift. And I'm thinking here about Chiron, that our deepest fears can hold wisdom. And so the shadow holds the key to our wholeness, is a very Chiron and Scorpio type energy, but it's scorpionic at its very most, its deepest and most essential. So by willingly facing our mortality, our desires, our motivations, our fears, our power dynamics, our agency or lack of agency, our power or lack of power, we discover the unshakable core that transcends them all. And that unshakable core that transcends them all is very Saturn, Neptune archetypal energy. So Saturn and Neptune in Scorpio, or, relating in Scorpio, that would be an alignment, a conjunction, that would be that transcendence. So Neptune in Scorpio, for example, because Neptune is about transcendence, would be transcending all of that. And here's a note about transcendence. I do not believe it is possible to completely transcend jealousy or to transcend fear. Fear serves a purpose, and it is to keep us alive. So the idea that you can just never feel fear ever again, transcendence seems to suggest that you'll never feel fear again. And here's what I think. Transcendence isn't, none of that ever happening. It is being able to rise above fear so you can get the greater message. To rise above jealousy so that you can get a greater and grander expression or expansion. So you're looking for a more expanded perspective. And that's what transcendence is. It's the ability to fly over, to zoom out, to get altitude, to look around from that zoomed out perspective, to see the whole and see how the many parts fit within that whole and how to better integrate it is what transcendence means to me. So when you hear me say that, that's what I mean. I don't mean that we're going to just pretend like we don't have feelings, because my experience of transcendence as it was taught to me from a very young child up was that transcendence means you're going to be over your feelings. You're going to be over your fears. You're going to be over them, and then you're going to move on past them, and that's not a thing that happens. Fear is always very present as we live our lives. When we do anything, step outside of our comfort zones, try new things, or leave things that felt safe and warm and wonderful, like home, we're going to feel doubt and fear. It's natural. So when we're thinking about that unshakable core that transcends and how to evolve in a way that makes us be able to merge and to be ourselves while at the same time sharing who we are with other people, I give you Odin. Now, the god Odin hung himself from Yggdrasil, which is the great cosmic tree, to gain wisdom. Now, you might, if you love tarot as I do, you'll notice that hanging upside down, the hanged one, is a reference to this, because that's what he did. He hung himself upside down, and that was a sacrifice of discomfort, physical discomfort, in the hopes of being able to see the world or to see himself or what have you from a very different perspective. But it also hangs you in one spot, so you have to release and let go of whatever comforts, figuratively speaking, you're holding on to in order to get the greater reward, which is the altered perspective with the Scorpio sting, which is that just because you have an altered perspective that takes you outside of your comfort zone, the sting here is that it doesn't guarantee happiness, comfort, or anything else. Merely that you will change your perspective, that you will transform the way you see things, which may potentially lead to good things. But here, the sting of the scorpion tail here is that there is no guarantee, and there never will be a guarantee, because, once again, their power and control are illusions. And so, when we're looking at Odin, we demonstrate that power, that power comes from voluntary letting go and release, rather than desperate. So it is making a conscious choice to let go. And Odin's sacrifice of an eye shows how, figuratively speaking, partial blindness can paradoxically lead to deeper vision. Now, you'll note in a lot of pop culture stories that whenever they show a seer, for example, the second installment of The Crow had a seer who was not unsighted, meaning they could not see, and had very powerful visions. And you'll see that in a lot of pop culture stories, which come from a long history, a long tradition of blind seers, like, for example, Tiresias of Greek myth, who was a seer of renown in Greek myth. And so the idea that partial blindness or even complete blindness can lead to deeper vision. The reason why you see blind seers is because to have sight is not the same thing as having vision. Okay, they're very different things. They may appear similar, but they're different. And the story of Odin points out that sacrifice. It points out where we might potentially be blind and where we might potentially have blind spots that we might have to sacrifice because they are comfort zone, they're comforts, they're like security blankets in order to see clearly, in order to have greater expanded vision. Okay? And so, as we conclude our exploration of Scorpio, consider that the Transformer teaches us to find strength not in avoiding intensity or passion, but by moving through it. And so the key to embodying this archetype lies not in controlling life's darkest experiences, aspects, etc., but to allowing them to catalyze one's evolution. So in our journey this week, noticing where we might be clutching tightly to control, and experimenting with the revolutionary act of letting go. Consider what parts of ourselves we have kept hidden that might contain untapped power or dynamicism if brought to light. Now, the Transformer's wisdom lies in recognizing that what appears to be a death is often the prelude to rebirth. And you'll note this if you love tarot as I do, that the death card shows that exactly. It shows death, but it also, if you look in the distance, there is a lovely sunrise and it's quite beautiful. So it is speaking of a rebirth. That's what the sunrise symbolizes. And so if you found value in today's descent into Scorpio's depths, consider sharing it with someone navigating their own transformative process. And until next time, oh, hold on one second, one last thing. We are on social media, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. Those links will be in the show notes. There is also a newsletter, free and paid, and always appreciate you if you leave reviews wherever you listen to podcasts so other people can find us with greater ease. I appreciate you and thank you very much. And until next time, we expand our horizons with Sagittarius the Seeker. May you trust the wisdom of your own unfolding. Peace and astral magic.